press secretary. Karoline, thanks so much for joining us. So let's start with the first one. Are we actually going to see this first debate on September 4th, or is Kamala Harris not going to have any part of this?
Well, we sure hope that Kamala Harris will show up for that debate on September 4th. President Trump has gladly accepted the invitation. He will be there no matter what, but Kamala Harris needs to be there as well. It is she who did not receive one single vote from Democrat voters to become their appointed nominee. She's only in this position because President Trump knocked Joe Biden out of the race on the last debate stage. So perhaps that's why she doesn't want to show up. It's been 19 days. She has not taken many questions from the press. She has not held a single press conference. She needs to be on that debate stage on the 4th and commit to all three of the debates that President Trump has accepted.
So if Kamala doesn't agree to debate on Fox, will Trump go forward with the September 10th debate on NBC?
Yes, he has committed to the September 4th debate on Fox News Channel, a September 10th debate on ABC, and a September 25th debate on NBC and Telemundo. He will be at all three, whether Kamala Harris shows up or not. It's very important to debate, and it's important to answer questions from for the American people from the press, which President Trump is clearly unafraid of doing, as evidenced by his more than hour-long press conference at Mar-a-Lago yesterday, where he took unscripted, unvetted questions on an array of issues. Kamala Harris could never, and her advisors know it, and that's why they're hiding her away.
Right now, we see some difference in the polling data. They say that Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are neck and neck right now. But what is your data telling you?
Well, our campaign predicted rightfully and realistically that there would be a little bit of a Harris honeymoon as the mainstream media galvanized around her and the Democrat Party became re-energized after their coup against Joe Biden. We were right to predict that. I've never seen such a large in-kind contribution to a campaign than the mainstream media is giving to Kamala Harris's campaign right now. And that eventually will dissipate. She will continue to expose herself for the incompetent politician that she is. And we will use the next 88 days, I believe, to push President Trump's winning message and expose how radically, dangerously liberal Kamala Harris and Tim Walz both are. So we are confident that President Trump's lead will hold and will continue to grow over the next coming months.
It's wild to have lived through the time where all of a sudden no one trusts polls anymore on either side. and we still are here going back and forth about them. It's wild times. I want to talk about even wilder times, though, and that would be Monday. Donald Trump is going to be with Mr. Musk. What can you tell us about that?
Well, all I can tell you is that it's going to be very exciting. We are very proud and excited to have Elon Musk's support and endorsement of President Trump and of his campaign. And it's going to be a very fun live stream to tune into, and our team will be releasing more details very soon. So stay tuned.
We are only weeks away from the shooting and assassination attempt on Donald Trump, and it feels like the mainstream media is trying to move on from this. What do we think now about this just kind of being pushed off to the side and on the back burner when it was one of the most historically significant events that we have seen in decades?
It is remarkable how quickly the mainstream media has moved on from the attempted assassination on President Trump's life. I think it's safe to say that if this happened to someone that the mainstream media supports, like a Democrat politician, they would be still talking about it around the clock. However, they've moved on, unfortunately, because it's President Trump, and they have a disdain for President Trump that's very evident to anyone with common sense that has watched the legacy media cover him over the past 8 years. And if you also look at what big tech has done in the wake of the assassination attempt on President Trump, they have actually tried to censor it and just remove it from history, erase it from the memory of the American people. If you Google assassination attempt of Donald Trump and start to type it in on Google, it doesn't show up. All the other presidents who have had attempts on their lives show up, but his name does not. And there were other big tech sites that were also allegedly removing that infamous photo of him, as you see there, raising his fist and chanting, "Fight, fight, fight." They want to erase this from the memory of the American public because President Trump showed such strength and defiance in the wake of evil. And they know that that was a very inspiring moment for so many people across this country, and they don't want them to see it. And it's abhorrent.
Karoline, you've mentioned the hour-long press conference that Donald Trump had over just yesterday. And Joe Biden, it was the first time that he had spoken since Joe Biden had dropped out of the race. So Trump offered this statement, though, in defense of Joe Biden. Let's take a listen.
This was taken away. The presidency was taken away from Joe Biden. And I'm no Biden fan, but I'll tell you what, from a constitutional standpoint, from any standpoint you look at, they took the presidency away. And people were saying he lost after the debate. He couldn't win. Well, I don't know that that's true necessarily. But whether he could win or he couldn't win, he had the right to run. And they took it away. They said they're going to use the 25th Amendment. They're going to hit you hard. Either we can do it the nice. I know exactly, because I know a lot of people on the other side, believe it or not. And they said, we'll do it the nice way or we'll do it the hard way. And he said, all right. So that, I mean, they've really taken, what they've done is pretty incredible.
What is your reaction when you hear that?
He's right. I mean, we witnessed a coup against Joe Biden from his own party. Democrat elitists and donors and party leaders, namely Nancy Pelosi, many reports stated that she led this coup, this internal ousting of Joe Biden from the ticket, because they realized that he was being exposed for the incompetent, senile old man that he was. And this was months of after the Democrats lied about his mental cognitive state for months. They told the American people baselessly that Joe Biden was fit for the job, and they would have shuffled him over that finish line in November if they could have. But thanks to President Trump and his dominant debate performance, he exposed Joe Biden for the cognitively declining, incompetent, weak, failed president that he is, and the Democrats had to kick him to the curb. It's quite sad to see, actually. And so now they've installed Kamala Harris as their Democrat Party darling, which is very rich, considering in 2020, she didn't even get 2% of the vote in her own primary, and the Democrats didn't want her on the ticket. But now they're telling us she's the best thing since sliced bread. I don't think the American people are going to buy it. And again, especially as they come to understand fully Kamala Harris's dangerously liberal record, not just as the co-pilot for Joe Biden's administration, but also as her time as an attorney general in San Francisco. She was weak on crime. And during her time as a senator from the very liberal state of California.
So one of the things that our audience is interested in every week, every day, is where are we at in terms of election integrity? It's on so many people's minds. So I'd love to take your temperature on this. Where do you think we're at? Have we made progress? How far do we have to go?
We have made progress indeed, and that's thanks to the new leadership that we have at the RNC, and both Michael Whatley and co-chair Laura Trump, both of whom came to this job with a full understanding that we need to fix our election system and ensure the integrity of the vote ahead of November 5th. And they have been working diligently hand in hand with our campaign as well to do just that. We're going on offense this election cycle, rather unlike in 2020, when we did play defense. We were trying to prove the irregularities that occurred in the courts, and it was too late. So we're getting ahead of that now, both by filing litigation in many of these battleground states against their legislatures if they are trying to pass election laws that are unconstitutional. For instance, in Nevada, which is a vote by mail state, the legislature there tried to pass a law claiming that you could count ballots after Election Day. We believe that is unconstitutional, and therefore the RNC and their great team of lawyers filed litigation against Nevada that they're actively engaged in, and they're engaged in litigation in every other battleground state. In addition to that, we're also ensuring that we build a grassroots army of volunteers, of poll workers, poll observers, who are going to be on the ground, not just on Election Day, but in the days and weeks leading up. If ballot harvesting is legal in these states, we'll be ballot harvesting. If vote by mail is legal in your state, we're ensuring that we are educating voters that they can vote by mail ahead of Election Day, because we're going to need every vote that we can, of course. And sometimes on Election Day, you can't make it to the polls. You have a family emergency. There's a storm. You don't know what could happen. And so banking those votes early and making sure we're tracking them ahead of time is also an important piece of that puzzle as well.
Karoline Leavitt, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Big Tech takes some inspiration from 1984 by scrubbing images of Trump's post-assassination attempt. You don't want to miss this. Coming up next. Earlier this week, Google admitted to the House Judiciary Committee that its search engine omitted the photos of the Trump assassination attempt. So here to discuss is Rachel Bovard, Senior Director of Policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute and Senior Advisor to the Internet Accountability Project. So Rachel, thanks for joining us. So what information about Trump has Google been hiding from all of its users now?
Well, it was a case where if you searched for anything related to the Trump assassination, it wouldn't auto-populate in Google's search box. And also, if you searched for information about President Trump, the search engine would populate articles about Kamala Harris instead. And now Google's attorneys told House Judiciary, our search engine box just wasn't up to date. It was just an oversight, which is laughable when you consider that Google has the world's most sophisticated search algorithm. It's powered by unprecedented scale. It leads the market, and yet we're supposed to think that it's stupid, that somehow it wasn't up to date. It's a laughable excuse, but this is what they do every time. When they're busted, they just claim ignorance, when in reality, we know this was intentional.
Rachel, great to have you on. Hopefully the first of many. Good to see you. I think we need to discuss how long this went on for. And also, have we seen anything on this level before? Because this sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's unclear how long they've been suppressing search around President Trump. They're not going to tell us, but any search that you can do yourself, right? Trump is one of the most visible, most prominent people in the world. And so when you search for something that happened to him and it doesn't come up, it raises all kinds of questions about what they've been, suppressing in prior searches or around prior topics. And yes, we have seen this before. We've seen it numerous times. Most infamously, perhaps, was the Hunter Biden laptop, which we now know, wasn't misinformation. It was just used in court. So clearly it's not misinformation. But around the 2020 election, any number of issues around COVID-19, we saw this information being suppressed. And why this matters, some people will say, well, who cares? Google's a private company. They can do whatever they want. You have to consider this in the context of scale. Google filters information for 90% of the world. They control 90% of the search market. And so what they put their finger on, what they choose to suppress or amplify, changes narratives around the world. It changes information. It changes the ability to look up counter arguments, the ability to even know counter arguments exist. And so this really does, we've never seen information control on this scale. And so you really have to consider it in that context, and it stops becoming, one-off issues, and it really starts becoming a very dystopian, totalitarian way of sort of knowledge and control and information discourse narrating, essentially, that these corporations are doing, oftentimes on behalf of one ideological persuasion.
Yeah, Google out there acting like it's an Ask Jeeves account or something. But we know it's so much bigger than all of this. So what kind of pressure, internally, externally, or influence were they receiving to actually come through and be forced to be there in front of the House?
Well, they were dragged in front of House Judiciary because of the efforts of Chairman Jim Jordan, who's been following a lot of these efforts on what Google's been doing. But I think, the converse of that question is also important, is were they getting pressure from one political party or the other? And the reason that's not a far-fetched question is because we saw it. In the recent Missouri v. Biden case that was argued before the Supreme Court, we have the receipts now. Because of the discovery in that case, we have chapter and verse, literally, in emails and text messages of the White House pressuring or at times ordering these companies to censor not only categories of information, but specific accounts, questions, all types of things. And so we know this kind of pressure does happen. But the flip side is also true in the sense that sometimes they don't even have to ask. right? What we're dealing with is almost an information cartel, not only in the private sector, but you have a group of corporations whose leadership agrees with one political party. And you start to see that in the way these corporations act around things like elections in particular. And in this case, this is just one example of what we hope is not the tip of the iceberg around this upcoming election. But 2020 has left a lot to be desired, and you can sort of prognosticate that forward and see some of the concern that might arise around 2024 and how these big tech companies are going to act.
For everyone watching, if you go to the blaze.com right now, you'll see an article by Rachel Bovard called "The Big Win Against Google Must Be Only the Beginning." Rachel, can you tell us about what you wrote for us today?
Sure. So this is mostly focused on the recent antitrust lawsuit against Google, brought by the Trump administration in 2020, finally resolved 4 years later, just this week, where a judge declared Google to be a monopoly in violation of Section 2 of the Sherman Act. This is specific to Google Search and a portion of their ad agency as well. And this is a big deal. Basically, the judge found that through a network of exclusive contracts, where Google has set itself up to be the default search option on mobile and browser devices, they foreclosed the market to basically all of its competition. And so in declaring Google a monopoly over search, it opens up a number of remedies, including structural breakup remedies that could be applied to Google. And, in the piece, I try to make the point that this should only just be the beginning. A lot of these companies have been the beneficiaries of antitrust attorneys and enforcement agencies that have been asleep at the switch as they've been consolidating control over these marketplaces. And we're now dealing with a speech sector that is a cartel, essentially. And so there's ongoing antitrust action against Facebook, against Amazon, against a number of these tech giants, against Apple as well. And, we should be, as a conservative movement, be vigorous about protecting the free market. And if that means bringing antitrust enforcement, then so be it. That's how we protect the marketplace. It's criminal enforcement. If you're a monopoly that's maintaining your monopoly through illegal means, you are violating the law and you should be held accountable.
And Rachel, to that point, where do we go from here? When you look at the fact that Google is now having to face, the music here in front of the House, will they continue with these actions, or is this going to be enough to dispel them from doing something like this in the future, would you believe?
Well, it's interesting when you look at, all the times these companies have been hauled before Congress and they take a beating, and there's a lot of rhetoric thrown around. They have almost learned how to manage that. They've learned how to bake it into their baseline. They know that they just go and they take their knocks and they say sorry and they try to look appropriately sad, and apologetic about their behavior, and then they change nothing. Antitrust is a little bit different, right? Because antitrust is through the courts. They have to make their case, and many times, or at least in this instance, they did not succeed. And there are going to be actual remedies applied to how they do business. And so this is a more powerful tool and a more potent tool, I would argue, in this current environment. Would I like Congress to do more here? Would I prefer Congress to be imposing these remedies? Yes, I do. I would, right? That is the democratic process in action. I would like our representatives to be speaking on behalf of all of us and doing that, but they have not, right? Outside of hearings, they don't legislate. They really sort of just wrap these tech execs on the knuckles and then go about their business. So the courts are really proving to be where the action is. And, I think it's hopefully going to continue because this is a space, again, where I think there's been lax enforcement and it's allowed this consolidation, which really harms speech. And I think this is how you have to think about it. If you're concerned about the speech powers of these platforms, the censorship, the deplatforming, a lot of that speech is downstream of the market power these companies have consolidated. And so when you go after that, if it's been illegally maintained on the antitrust side, you actually create an environment where there's real competition in the marketplace and you can start to compete these speech concerns away, as opposed to now, like a judge just found, you have Google in particular foreclosing the market to its competitors.
Well, after being involved in these debates for the last many years, it does seem like there's progress, and I love the way you articulate these issues. Extremely important. And I think most people in our audience are completely in agreement with you as well. One thing I just want to add that I think is interesting is on top of all the doing evil that Google has done is that their search sucks. I mean, the one thing that we forget in this is that their product actually sucks, and they're so big and so powerful. We sometimes forget that these things do decay over time. And I mean, I don't. It's not the same internet, right? So when you suck at what you do and the service you're supposed to provide, eventually that's going to catch up to them as well.
Rachel, a quick final word here.
Well, that's a consequence of being one of them anyway, of being a monopoly, right? Your product can degrade, you can reduce consumer choice, you can harm their privacy, but they know there's nowhere else to go because they have no near peer. And so hopefully, right, if there's a correct remedy applied, maybe Google will improve and the whole internet will improve.
I hope so. Rachel, thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
When we get back, a member of the Biden-Harris team admits to flagging posts for big tech to take down, and the journalist who broke the story will join us next. Journalist Matt Orfalea recently posted a part of the Biden-Harris team Zoom meeting on X. Now, during this meeting, the team framed an online discussion about Joe Biden's mental health decline as misinformation.
One of the smartest things that I think the party did itself was over the last couple of years, they actually invested in a team that Tim runs, and you'll hear from Tim, to detect and track misinformation and misinformation narratives in the sort of various corners of the internet, and then actually go out and flag it to platforms as a violation of their policy. And so that work, I mean, the stuff that they did was a critical asset. That piece of infrastructure, I think, was one of the more important decisions that was made in sort of the party space over the last couple of years.
That is the video there. And Matt joins us now to break it all down for us. So, Matt, let's start with just the basics. How did you even find this Zoom meeting in the first place?
Okay, so it was a webinar on how the Biden 2020 campaign fought disinformation, hosted by the lobbying group, advocate group, Hate Not Hope. And it was on their Facebook page back like a day after they had that webinar in November 2020.
So what was the worst part of all of this that you uncovered?
Man, the worst part. Just so much bad stuff. How to choose. What I think is bad but also funny is just seeing them refer to Biden's mental decline or talk of Biden's mental decline as, quote, disinformation and, quote, misinformation narrative. It's just,
Yes.
I think it's just amazing.
Yeah, right. Just to see it live and in the wild. But
especially after this man, would not define it in testimony under oath.
Right.
Sorry to cut you off there.
I know, but as we know, I mean, it is hilarious to all of us, of course. But as we know,
Hilarious and sad.
Oh yeah,
Very sad at the same time.
Well,
the keep going on.
Right.
Oh, it's laugh or
Right.
cry every day, so I choose to laugh
Yes.
as much as I can. So keeps the booze away. But what we have to talk about here is the fact that this still has an impact. So I mean, the concern around his mental fitness decreased by 8 points among voters, right, as a result of targeting online. When you tell people things, it does have an effect, whether it's kids in a classroom or all of us looking at a screen. We all say, well, it doesn't affect me, of course, but that advertising must affect some other dumb person somewhere else, right? So it does have this effect, and that's what's terrifying about this, no?
Yeah, it is scary. And as I noted in the thread, I mean, this kind of this advanced targeting that is commonplace now, because due to all the data on us that's collected wherever we travel the internet, on social media and elsewhere, these campaigns know so much about us, they can easily craft something like a message that they know you or I are most susceptible to. And what's crazy is, it can be completely different messaging. And that's why our country, our society is bubbling into, almost different countries, different networks that just whose concept of reality is totally opposing. So that is certainly scary, and it was scrutinized, this methodology using the new technology in 2016 when used by Cambridge Analytica, reportedly by Cambridge Analytica on behalf of Trump, 2016. Even though, again, like, this technology is just getting more advanced, even though it was used by Democrats before Trump 2016 and clearly afterwards in this case, this last 2020 presidential election. And instead of scrutinizing it or having any critical discussion about it at all, they literally celebrated it in the New York Times with the headline, Biden's digital team, quote, tames MAGA internet. I mean, it's incredible.
It is. And we look at what's happening over in the UK right now, where people are getting arrested for their social media posts. Now, that's not happening here, but they are actively trying to go around and say, oh, this misinformation, this disinformation. And it was one of the top items at Davos this year. And you like to say, okay, maybe they're just crazy. Maybe they're just having a ski trip. But then you see it filter down into everything that's happening in the United States and in the UK right now. So where do we go from here?
Where do we go? I mean, I wish I had solutions. I mean, the only way we can get to a solution is recognize what's actually happening. And so just reporting on this stuff, talking about it. What I find amazing is, the new VP pick, obviously Harris's new VP pick, Tim Walz, his language mirrors that of the UK, talking about how misinformation and hate speech are not constitutionally protected. Like, that's pretty scary.
That is absolutely scary. And one of the things that we will continue to be talking about here. Matt, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me.
Peterson, when I listen to this story, it reminds me of something back from the Obama administration. And we had a guy named Cass Sunstein, and it feels like they're just nudging us. They're not throwing us all of this information. We're not being force fed this every single day in a very large way. It's just a little bit here and a little bit there.
Yeah.
Until one day we wake up and they say, oh, look, Kamala's president.
Yeah. And the idea is little by little, get you to accept a little bit here, a little bit there. To nudge you to the point where you'll accept very big things, very crazy, very untrue things. And I mean, we're already there, right, in so many ways. If you had said 10 years ago that it's okay to sexually mutilate, your children's genitals, and that's maybe their choice, I mean, that'd be absolutely insane. I mean, people would want to lock you up for being crazy yourself. But what happens is over time, you accept the untruth and you start to repeat it back yourself. So you participate in this small little lie. And that's what leads us to this very dangerous place in which we're going.
But to Matt's final point there with Tim Walz as vice president for Kamala Harris on the ticket right now, this is a real issue that we are going to continue to face in this election cycle. I wish that wasn't true, but the fact is there is somebody that could be the second person in line for the presidency that believes everything that's happening right now in the UK.
Oh, yeah. So the vice president in the United States potentially could be someone who absolutely supports putting people in jail for social media posts. I mean, why would we be surprised? And this is what you have to think about. You're being nudged in the audience every day to accept as normal the fact that we even have to argue about some of this crazy stuff. So absolutely, that is where it's going. That is what the left wants to do. Even
like we just said, with the Google results and everything, everywhere we look, it's just one more nudge here and there. When we come back, a biological man tries to enter a Missouri Lifetime Fitness. BlazeTV host Jason Whitlock will be coming on to explain why this is a national issue. Stay tuned.
I look over and I see, what I believe to be a man walking in a bikini. He had the full genitalia, the male genitalia.
A Lifetime Fitness in Missouri is under fire for allowing a biological male to use the women's locker room. So here to discuss it is Jason Whitlock, host of Blaze TV's Fearless. So Jason, welcome to the show. I am officially back, and I want to just thank you for all the kind words that you said the first time. But let's dive in to this story because it's absolutely insane. Take us through it. How did this get started?
Well, this man who was married for 23 years, had a child with his wife of 23 years. His wife worked at this Lifetime Fitness. The man was a member of Lifetime Fitness previously under his male identity. He's been recently divorced and has decided he's a woman. The state of Missouri listed him as a woman on his driver's license, and he used that driver's license to get a membership at Lifetime Fitness. Now as a woman, I think he calls himself Eris Discordio Montano. And he started parading around in his royal blue bikini and went into the, woman's locker room and was confronted by Cindy Zykin. And then, all hell broke loose from there, and it set off 7, 8, 9, 10 days of him camping out. He's homeless. He lives in his car. And so he started camping out from basically 9 a.m. until the early evening at Lifetime Fitness, and protests ensued, and the attorney general got involved. And then he started making threats over social media and started targeting Cindy and her husband and other members that spoke out. But he actually, visited their home or their neighborhood as trying to intimidate Cindy and Andrew. And Andrew's a former Marine, and took appropriate precautions. But yeah, it's been crazy. And my take on all of this is just like, this is why we have to quit pandering to these groups, because we've elevated their expectations. This man should have no expectations. He's carrying a bat and 2 balls. He should have no expectations that he could use a woman's bathroom. But we've set those expectations for him, and so he's disappointed, and now he's threatening people.
Jason, we know we've seen similar weird things happen at Planet Fitness and other places that are allowing these mentally disturbed people to do this. What's going on with the business here, Lifetime Fitness? How did they respond, and are people upset with them?
Not well, but Lifetime Fitness, somewhat appropriate. I have some sympathy for him. Hid behind, like, hey, look, the state of Missouri gave him a driver's license that says he's a woman. We're going to treat him like that. That's our policy. We don't want to be sued or whatever. But I think the actual people that work at Lifetime Fitness, most of them were sympathetic to their membership, who thought this was outrageous. This guy is showering and grooming with women and children in that locker room. But I think the people that work at Lifetime Fitness feel like their hands are tied. And there's a handful of their employees that are woke and think, hey, this is just the way of the world and everyone needs to get on board. But Lifetime Fitness has not handled this the way we would want, but I'm a tiny bit sympathetic because the entire American culture has been pandering to this worldview or new social norm that all a man has to do is say he feels like a woman and we all have to treat him like one. It's a joke.
So what's Lifetime Fitness doing then, or even just like the police in the community? You said that this man has shown up at Cindy's house, right? That is a very real concern. So what's being done in regards to that?
Well, eventually they did revoke his membership because of his social media posts. And some of his social media posts were so threatening, so unstable that they revoked his membership, and police came and removed him from the club. He's been banned from the club. The Zykins have a restraining order. He can't come within 500 feet of their home or of Cindy. So far he's been removed, but he has been making threats still, and he's posted the name of Cindy and some other people that he's upset with. But where we stand right now, and this is what upsets me, is just it feels like we're just waiting for something bad to happen, and then we'll complain rather than look. We need to get this guy the help that he needs, and we need to start treating these people that have these gender identity issues like they have some mental concerns that need to be treated.
Jason, I love the way you talk about in this piece and others. It's pandering, but it's pandering to someone else's delusion. And you're a man who takes words very seriously when you write and when you speak. And could you say more about that for our audience? Because I feel like it's a very, very important point these days that when we live in this delusion.
Well, a world that's based on feelings, delusional emotions is a world that invites chaos and dysfunction and disorder. And so someone saying, hey, I feel this way, and now we got to make all the rules based around their feelings. Well, what about when they feel something different? Because I would assume for a number of years, this man felt like a husband and father and a man. But this pandering that we're doing because we don't want to hurt people's feelings, it doesn't serve the greater society. It doesn't serve the individuals. It actually just promotes more and more chaos. I spelled out some hard truths in the column you guys referenced, just like, hey, as a Black person, I'm tired of the culture pandering to Black people and saying, hey, any shortcomings you're having economically, educationally, or whatever, it's all because of, systemic racism. Well, yeah, that's pandering. The truth is it's because the abandonment of biblical values and the institution of marriage. When you look at marriage rates, when you look at the statistics of Black kids and Black families that are married and intact, they tend to be just as successful as the rest of society that's married and in traditional family. Once you destroy the family, chaos sets off and sets loose. And so we're lying to Black Americans about what the real issue is. And so we don't address the real issue. And then we just promote more and more chaos because our kids are unsupervised. They haven't been properly nurtured and developed in a two-parent home like they should be. Look, we just spent 3.5 years pandering to Joe Biden and the political left. We all knew that he had cognitive issues. Many people on the left pandering, living in denial of that. And look, here's where we are. We're going to pander to Kamala Harris and pretend like she's a qualified person for the presidency. She's not. That's very dangerous. We're at the brink of World War III, and we're going to perhaps send a cackling, giggling woman who can't control her laughter to be the leader of this country. That's very dangerous.
Yeah, we aren't a serious country right now. The great Jason Whitlock, thanks so much for your time and for everything that you're doing on this story.
Jill, this was such an honor to be on the show with you. What an upgrade. Anytime. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jason. Vince Vaughn says the era of good comedies is done, and we'll explain why audiences are having the last laugh when we return. Vince Vaughn recently spoke with the New York Times and explained why we no longer see movies like The Hangover. Vaughn zeroed in on cancel culture, saying that there was a moment of certain people, they could feel like they would be the one that would be the judge and jury of what is a story and what's going too far. It's a crazy thing as human beings to think that my ideas are the best, and if I can just force people to do what I believe, the world would be great. Toto, the founder of HollywoodInToto.com and the host of Hollywood in Toto Podcast, recently wrote an article for Blaze Media's Align on the Vaughn comments and cancel culture overall. He is here to discuss everything now with us. And Christian, let's just start with Vince Vaughn's comments and what you think of them in general.
Really well thought out. I think he was able to use terms without going into the woke/cancel culture direction, which I think makes it more approachable. But he's right. He's absolutely right. And I think he said it in such an eloquent way because it really is people thinking they could change the world for the better if you just take certain jokes out of pop culture. Of course, nothing could be further from the truth. It's not the way things work, not the way life works. So now we get comedies that are safe and predictable and boring and bland. We get late night TV, which pulls all the punches. So yeah, I really appreciate what Vince Vaughn said. And also, I think we're all pretty critical of celebrities. They say dumb things. They're not very eloquent at times. They share fake news, but sometimes some of them are pretty smart. And I'd put Vince Vaughn in that category. He knows what he's talking about. And it's clear that he's invested in the subject because they don't make movies like they used to.
I think that's well said about Vince Vaughn, and he's just someone who is a serious person, a thoughtful person, and has been through it. I mean, the one thing I'd add is he has skin in the game, and I think that's an interesting thing. Speaking of which, this is campaign season. This is the time when everyone has to show their colors for different teams. Do you think celebrities have anything to lose though by endorsing Kamala Harris in this election?
I'd say yes and no. I think within the industry, absolutely not. Nothing they could say that is pro-Harris is going to hurt them at all. In fact, it might rise their status or maybe even get them a job or two. But I think we've seen in the last few years that Hollywood is contracting, that people are more wary of where they put their dollars, their leisure money. And so I think that there are some people at home who say, I don't want to go see movie X or TV show Y because that actor just insulted me and my values. So I think what you're seeing now is a two-tier thing where the Mark Hamills of the world are going in that direction aggressively. And then maybe people like Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman of Deadpool and Wolverine fame are just like, hey, we're just going to put on a show. Why don't you come see our movie? We're not going to yell at you. We're not going to lecture you. And I think they will be more successful in the long run.
Ryan Reynolds is one of the best friends of my homegirl, Taylor Swift, and I hate that she's basically a socialist, but I still love her anyway. When you look at Taylor Swift, I know that she's come out and she has endorsed Joe Biden in the past. She's tried to do things in local Tennessee politics. Do you think that she will come out and endorse Kamala Harris this time around?
I almost think she has to. The pressure on her is going to be enormous as the weeks and weeks go on. Heaven help them if Harris is trailing in the polls, the pressure will double and triple. But just remember what happened the last time. She stayed out of the political fray. She didn't push Hillary Clinton. She just stayed apolitical. And the press just hounded her. They would compare her to people who are white nationalists and say, well, you've got to condemn these white nationalists who are Taylor Swift fans. No, she doesn't. And the fact that she stayed on the sidelines also caused her a lot of tension, a lot of turmoil within the media. So when the media doesn't like you, they let you know. Just ask J.K. Rowling how that works. So I think she'll almost have no choice. And it's a shame because the last 2 years she's been apolitical again, and she's the biggest star on the planet. So I think if she wanted to kind of really nurture that, she would stay out of the fray. But I think the media is going to pull her back in.
Peterson, I'll update you on the latest Taylor Swift drama in the break. Don't worry. But go ahead.
I'm waiting to hear. Update me now about Taylor. I have something that I think is super exciting, just in terms of speculation, and that is that rumor that we will be publishing an article about, compiling some serious evidence that possibly it's not just about Gina Carano and pushing her to destroy Disney, but that Elon Musk might actually want to initiate a hostile takeover at some point of Disney. What do you think of that? It's at least very fun to think about.
It is. I mean, boy, Elon Musk has really intersected pop culture in fascinating ways, most specifically with free speech, but also by supporting the Gina Carano lawsuit against Disney. But listen, anytime Elon gets involved in things, it gets complicated, it gets interesting, it's worth following. But wouldn't it be great if the greatest family-friendly company in decades we're back in the hands of people who cared about the consumer, who wanted to, keep the brand as pristine as it once was. That would be wonderful. We don't have that right now. Disney has really done so much damage to its own legacy, its own brand, its own product. And so we'll have to wait and see. But that could be enticing, that's for sure.
Well, if Elon wants to take over Disney, their stock has been plummeting, and it would be a lot cheaper right now to do so. But there's a new movie out called War Game. How does that go back and forth with January 6th?
Well, it's a documentary of sorts that says, what if it was January 6th next time, but even worse? And you get a bunch of people who are pretending to be Republicans and or rock-rib Democrats doing this sort of cosplay about what January 6th was in their heads, not, of course, not the reality. So it's an independent film. It's a documentary. It's going to be in a few cities this weekend. I'm sure it'll gather about $8 or $9 in total. It's just ridiculous at this point. This whole fever dream that January 6th was far, far worse than they said it was, that we actually know what happened there. But that's Hollywood. That's, showbiz. That's what these filmmakers want to do. They want to relive that day. They want to keep that narrative alive, especially during an election season. So I don't think it's going to move the needle an iota, but it's getting great reviews. So there's that.
Sometimes the worst movies get the best reviews. Christian Toto, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Peterson?
Well, that was fun. I just want Elon to buy Disney. We didn't get a chance to talk to him. We should next time about Bob Dylan. Timothy Chalamet playing Bob Dylan in a biopic for all those boomers out there and some of the boomer culture appreciators like myself.
This is where our musical tastes will differ.
Yes, I listen to all kinds of music, but not Taylor. Not very much.
It's okay. I'll fill you in though. Don't worry. And you know what? I look at
I'm
this.
happy she's safe after that attempt to commit terrorism at one of her conferences.
Yeah, the shows in Vienna, if we want to go there, we can. The shows in Vienna had to be canceled because of terrorism, and they were going after her, and they were going to go out there and have some bioweapons, I guess. So big things happening, and at least we avoided that, right? Because who knows what's going to happen this weekend anyway, Pat.
We're no World War III. We're going to stay sane, limber, sober, relax. We need you that way.
That is absolutely what we are going to do. Now, make sure while we're doing all of those things that you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. Don't forget to rate and review. And we'll be back here to break it all down on Monday.